Well, I don't know about you, but I can't stop smiling. This has been truly an inspirational morning. When we see the work that Wes is doing, when we see the work that's going on around the world with philanthropy and community building, it truly is awe-inspiring. And what I want to do with you this morning is perhaps broaden your understanding about what philanthropy is, and also broaden your understanding about what community is. I noticed on the promo, it's TED Cities 2.0. Well, personally, I think it should have been TED Communities 2.0, because I want you to think really about what community means to you, and also about philanthropy is more than just about the money. So just we're on air, so spend just a little bit of time thinking about what's your community. Not necessarily where your community is, but what's your community. A few days ago, we had to do a bit of a run-through on this, and I walked in and I saw Adrian, the first presenter, William Ross. Well, Adrian and I are part of a Monday night community. We both sing in Chorus Niagara, and it was great to see what it was like to see this other side of Adrian this morning come up and talk about William Ross and the building of St. Catharines. I left that community for a year last year, and I can't tell you what it did to me to come back to it again this year, in terms of that whole network of people who I didn't know 10 years ago, who I know now. I work in the community of Niagara. And for those of you that don't know, Niagara was made up of over 70 different smaller communities. If you're from Fort Erie, there's Ridgeway, Crystal Beach, Stevensville, and there's even smaller communities within those. I was at a meeting the other day where the speaker was introduced as coming from East St. Catharines. Well, where the heck is East St. Catharines? It's Merton. But in St. Catharines, I moved here in '77 to open a bookstore, and it's a great way to become a part of a community because you're meeting with a lot of kindred spirits. So I came to learn about Merton, Port Dalhousie, Western Hill. But my job takes me now across the region, and the region is made up of so many different communities. So that's sort of the community in which you live. There's the community in which you work. There's the community in which you recreate and in which you volunteer. So when you think about what's your community, what's your city, what is it that you are doing, and where is it that you are doing it, I want you to think a little bit more about what's your community. Now, if you were asked to name a philanthropist, what name first comes to mind? You might think of Wes, because it's first, but I actually didn't realize that Wes was going to be speaking just before me. But if you think back in the early 20th century, some of the philanthropists may have been the Rockefellers, the Carnegies. They've done an amazing amount of work. The library system, all those libraries that unfortunately many of them are not standing right now, were started by the Carnegies. They're beautiful. There's still one, I think, in Merton, or in East St. Catharines. There's still one in Grimsby that serves as a community center. When you think of philanthropists in Canada, you may think of the Bronfmans, you may think of the Thompsons, but you tend to think of people of wealth. And in our community, we may think of the Walker family, the Fleming family. In Fort Erie, there's the Freeland family, but they tend to be related to wealth. And what I want to tell you, or share with you today, that perhaps philanthropy is more than just about the money. A person who seeks to promote the welfare of others. Now, I think every speaker that has spoken to you today has really talked about how individuals in their communities have promoted the welfare of others. Money helps, but it's not necessarily always about the money. So, what does The Wizard of Oz have to do with philanthropy? I don't know if you remember this section of the film, but they've just come back, Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion and the Scarecrow have just come back from killing the Wicked Witch of the West, and they're come to claim whatever it is that they were looking for. And so he gives a brain to the Scarecrow. He gives a medal of courage to the Cowardly Lion, and the Tin Man comes up. And the Tin Man wants a heart. And I'm not going to be able to act this out like Adrian did this morning, but the wizard says there are these people in this world whu are you think he's going to say philanderers, but who are good deed doers. He just can't say the word philanthropist. And that's really what he's going to do and give to the Tin Man is a heart, because really behind a lot of philanthropy is heart. So what I want to do is sort of share with you 4 stories of people who have touched me in the work that I've done, who have done amazing work in their community, some with money, some without money. So this is an 8-year-old girl. She was 8-year-old at the time. This was back in 2002. And her name is Kristin Peacock. She sent me a letter. We were raising some money to send kids to camp. And Kristin is part of this network, and as a parent it gives me the chills, but it's a network of junior dragsters. So behind St. Paul Street, you know, there's that nice St. Paul Crescent. They would use places like this, very well organized, lots of risk management, safety precautions, but to raise dragsters. She sent this letter because her community is St. Anne's. It's one of those little communities within, I think it's in Lincoln. It's on the road between Victoria Ave and Smithville. And she's a Brownie, and as a Brownie she went to camp. And she saw how we were trying to raise money to send kids to camp, and she wrote this letter to say, I know how much camp means to me as a child, and I want other kids to be able to have that opportunity. People are really interested in the work that I do and how I race, and I would like to use that interest to raise some money to send kids to camp. So she would go, you know, in downtown they have the auto shows, or she would go to the meets. She actually did extremely well in terms of her competition, but she managed over 2 years to raise $2,300 and send a bunch of kids to camp. She now is in university. I haven't had much to do with her since she started this, but I keep in contact with her aunt once in a while. That sense of giving back to her community, which was kids in Niagara, and using her other community, which was the interest in kids racing, to raise money to help kids do what she really enjoys to do. This is one I'm going to try and do without crying, because it's about a gentleman named Luigi Satechi. He's here, it looks like his first communion for his niece, and that's his mother, Amelia. Luigi came to see me, back in 2001, because he wanted to do something for his community. He had just had some heart issues. I think he was confronting his own mortality, as we tend to do when we are faced with some pretty serious health issues. And he wanted to do something for young people in Niagara related to health. Now, Lou first learned about philanthropy in Northern Ontario. He grew up in one of those one-industry towns where at Christmas time the train would arrive and the Christmas presents from Eaton's would arrive, and the company would distribute them to kids and families in the community. And he thought that this was a really generous thing for that company to do. I don't think he ever married. I think he was a blue-collar worker, and when I met him, he was retired. And his community also included having coffee every morning in the food court at the Penn Centre, or 3 times a week he would go to the casino, or maybe every 5 or 6 years he'd buy a new car. And Lou is one of these people who live in these red brick houses that you see across North America. He grew up during the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Lou was a saver and not a spender. I don't think he ever read that book, The Wealthy Barber, but Lou, it turns out, was one of those people that was a millionaire next door. I didn't know it. I mean, he kept giving me tomatoes, which was really kind of nice of him. Whenever he dropped by, or he'd ask me to come by and we'd have a cup of coffee and talk about what he wanted to do. So he set up a bursary to send students from Niagara to get healthcare education. And Brock was just starting a new program, and so we funded a bursary for Brock. And over the years, he kept contributing to that, and number of young people ended up benefiting from his philanthropy. He came to me about a year before he died because he wanted to talk about what more could he do, because his bank had been talking to him about estate planning, and you know, there were tax issues, he didn't have kids. And so what he ended up doing was using his wealth to create bursaries for students going to Niagara College, students going to Brock University. He did something for the hospital. He used his accumulated wealth to be able to benefit his community. And this is Isaac, Isaac to Ninehouse. Isaac, as you can see, this is actually a picture that came out of the local paper. This is a project that he did earlier this year, but Isaac, who is 8 now, started this initiative when he was 4 years old. So, I mean, we think of philanthropists, I mean, we're hearing more and more about the great stuff that young kids do, but Isaac was really concerned about how he lives in the downtown neighborhood. He's at a school where there are kids of different income. He was very, very concerned about some kids coming to school without having enough food. So he just got a peanut butter jar after his mom had cleaned it out and walked in his neighborhood asking for a little bit of help that he could give money to the food bank to be able to buy some food for the breakfast program. And each year he would do a little bit more. And this summer, what Isaac did was he decided to actually get a little bit more formal with his asking. He said his greatest joy was to be able to write the letter to ask people to help kids get supplies for school. I mean, I was a parent. I had 3 kids going to school at the same time, and it's very expensive, and I still can't imagine how a backpack only seems to last 12 months. Why you have to have new backpacks every year or new markers every year, but it seems to be a thing. And there is a lot of backpack programs. So Isaac ended up, he had a little goal about what he wanted to do. He sent this, and he used the new technology. He sent emails around to family and friends, and what Isaac did was raise enough money and supplies to help a lot of kids get back to school with a backpack and sneakers. And I went over to Isaac's house because he happens to live in my neighborhood on Wednesday, and I asked him why he has been doing what he's doing. And he said his kind of vision, and this, I mean, he's wise beyond his words. His little 4-year-old brother was running like a maniac around the house at the same time, and Isaac was sitting there calmly at the table and basically saying he wants people to be able to have what they need. This kid's 8 years old. He is a remarkable example of us having hope for the future. The last person I want to talk about is Scott. And I don't know, maybe by a show of hands, how many of you in the room have coached, put your hands up if you've coached, if you've been on a committee for something, if you've been on a board for something, if you volunteered at a fundraiser, anything like this. Well, I think in terms of that, many of you in this room are philanthropists. And when I heard Scott's story about what he did, many of us get involved with events and organizations when our kids are small. Scott moved to Port Weller, which is in northeast St. Catharines. But I mean, I grew up in Burlington where the lake was to the south of me. Moved here where the lake is to the north of me. My work takes me to Port Colborne where the lake is to the south of me. So I love the names of communities because directions, but in Port Weller, when Scott's daughter was probably about 6, he got involved with the Neighborhood Association and the Port Weller Soccer League. 20 years ago, there were 200 kids in the Port Weller Soccer League. And like many people who have some inherent leadership abilities, even though Scott may not acknowledge that he does, you get asked to, well, can you maybe sit on the organizing committee? Can you perhaps sit on the board? And over the years, Scott kept saying yes, because he really had a sense on how important it is to build a community. And what's really important and wonderful about after 20 years, Scott is still involved. I asked him, what about like succession planning? You know, I'm sure you're not doing it for your kids anymore, but you can see him still there. He's still involved because he wants to make sure that the 4 cornerstones that drive this organization are still in place. It's about having fun. It's about no fundraising. It's about keeping it affordable for kids. And it's about fair play. And to this day, I think there are over 2,000 kids in this soccer league. It's probably the largest one in Niagara, and it's still run by volunteers like Scott. So when you think of what that original definition about philanthropy is, Scott epitomizes that. So what I want you to sort of reflect upon as you leave and going forward is really what you can do as a philanthropist. And I've kind of borrowed I'm sure JFK wouldn't mind so much just changing a few words on what it is that he said in his inaugural address. Ask not what your community can do for you, but ask what you can do for your community. Thank you.